Hey there, justice lovers. Before we dive into this breathtaking tale, do me a favor, like this video. Subscribe to our channel for more incredible stories, and hit that notification bell. Trust me, this is one of those stories that proves karma isn't just real. It can be absolutely brutal. Are you ready for the most shocking twist you've ever witnessed? Imagine this. A woman, 7 months pregnant, stands on the threshold of what was supposed to be her future baby's room, now a battlefield of shattered dreams. Uncontrollable tears stream down her face as her eyes take in the devastation. Hand-painted murals slashed with red paint, a custom-made wooden crib torn to pieces, baby clothes ripped apart and scattered across the floor like broken promises. But there was something her cheating husband, Marcus, and his psychotic mistress, Victoria, didn't know. This was no ordinary pregnant woman. This was a mother protecting her unborn child. And when you threaten a mother's baby, you have just awakened the most dangerous force on earth. By the end of that night, Victoria will have no choice but to disappear, quietly, forever. Those were Isabel's exact words as she planned her revenge. What Victoria didn't expect was that Isabel was recording her every word. Do you believe a mother's love can overcome any betrayal? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. The afternoon sun cast golden rays through the massive windows of a luxurious penthouse in New York City, illuminating what should have been the most beautiful room in the Serrano family mansion. Isabel Garcia Serrano stood on the threshold of the nursery she had spent 6 months lovingly designing, her hand resting protectively on her 7-month pregnant belly. Every detail had been chosen with infinite care, from the hand-painted murals of dancing angels on the walls to the custom-made wooden crib that had taken a master carpenter 3 weeks to complete. At 28, Isabel had an artistic soul that had made her one of Boston's most sought-after interior designers before she married Marcus Serrano 3 years ago. Her delicate features were enhanced by warm brown eyes that sparkled with creativity and intelligence. Now, carrying her first child, she radiated that special glow that made pregnancy beautiful. The soft pastel colors of the room, dusty pink, cream and gold, reflected her gentle nature and her dreams for the little girl who would soon call this room home. The nursery was her masterpiece. Silk curtains embroidered with butterflies framed the windows. An antique rocking chair sat beside the crib, where Isabel had spent countless hours reading pregnancy books and imagining herself singing lullabies to her daughter. The walls were adorned with paintings she had created herself, whimsical scenes of mothers and babies, fairy tales, and garden parties where children played under rainbow skies. Marcus Serrano had built an empire around children's dreams. At 30, he was the brilliant and ruthless CEO of Angel's Legacy, a luxury baby goods chain worth 500 million euros. His stores spanned the United States, each one a temple to parenthood, where wealthy families came to buy everything from diamond-encrusted pacifiers to cribs made of exotic woods. Marcus was tall, with sharp features, and the kind of commanding presence that made boardrooms go silent when he entered. Their life together had seemed like a fairy tale. Lavish trips to Paris, where Marcus would buy her vintage baby clothes from exclusive boutiques. Weekends in Tokyo, selecting the finest silk for tiny kimonos. Diamond jewelry that caught the light just as beautifully as Isabel's smile, when Marcus surprised her with another thoughtful gift. The media called them NYC's royal couple, the artistic beauty and the business titan building their empire of dreams. But fairy tales, Isabel was about to learn, could turn into nightmares in the space of a single afternoon. The first crack in their perfect world appeared one Tuesday night in October. Marcus had been working late again, or so he claimed. These late nights had become increasingly frequent over the last 3 months, always with the excuse of expanding into the European market or finalizing the Asian distribution deal. Isabel had tried to be understanding. After all, she had temporarily put her own career on hold to focus on the pregnancy and prepare for motherhood. That night, Marcus left his laptop open on the kitchen counter while he took a shower. Isabel had no intention of snooping, but a notification sound caught her attention. An email had arrived from Victoria Ross, Angel's Legacy's head of marketing. Isabel knew Victoria, a stunning 26-year-old with flowing black hair, emerald eyes, and the kind of curves that made men stop mid-sentence. She was brilliant at her job, having grown Angel's Legacy's social media presence by 300% in just 1 year. The email preview made Isabel's blood run cold. "Honey, I can't wait for you to leave that pregnant woman and for us to start our real life together." With trembling fingers, Isabel opened the email. What she read tore her world into a million pieces. "Marcus, my love, I'm tired of hiding. I'm tired of pretending I respect that wife of yours while she waddles around the house playing house. You promised me that after the baby was born, you would divorce her and we would be together openly. I want it now. I've given you the best year of my life and I deserve more than stolen moments in hotel rooms. I want you to leave her. Today. That baby doesn't need to be raised by a father who doesn't love its mother. I'll give you children, real children, born out of love, not obligation. The new store opening is in 3 weeks. I want to walk into that event as your official partner, not as your dirty little secret. Choose, Marcus, her or me. Forever yours, Victoria. P.S. I have a little surprise planned for your precious wife's nursery. She needs to understand there's no place for her baby in our future." Isabel read the email 3 times, each reading making the words cut deeper into her heart. Her legs gave out, and she sank into a kitchen chair, one hand clasped over her mouth to stifle a sob, the other cradling her belly protectively. The baby kicked, as if sensing her distress. When Marcus came out of the shower 20 minutes later, his hair still damp and looking more attractive than ever in his silk pajamas, Isabel was waiting for him with the laptop open. "How long?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. Marcus looked at the screen, and for a moment his confident facade cracked. But instead of shame or remorse, his expression hardened into something cold and calculating. "How long what, Isabel? Don't lie to me, not now. How long have you been sleeping with Victoria?" Marcus walked over to the kitchen island, poured himself a glass of whiskey, and drank it slowly before answering. 14 months. The casual way he said it, as if he were talking about the weather, made Isabel's heart shatter completely. 14 months. But that means you were with her when we conceived the baby. You were with her during my morning sickness. You were with her when we first heard the heartbeat. Isabel, you're being dramatic. Dramatic? Isabel's voice rose, echoing in the marble kitchen. Dramatic? I'm 7 months pregnant with your child, and you've been having an affair for over a year. Keep your voice down, the neighbors. I don't care about the neighbors. Isabel stood up, swaying slightly, as the pregnancy made sudden movements difficult. I care about my husband. I care about our marriage. I care about our baby. Marcus finished his whiskey and set the glass down with a sharp clink. The truth is, Isabel, Victoria understands my world better than you ever have. She understands business. She understands ambition. She doesn't just sit around painting pictures of clouds and rainbows. Each word was a knife to Isabel's heart. Painting pictures? Is that what you think I do? I built a successful design business before I married you. I gave it up to support your dreams, to create a home for us, and I appreciate it. But Victoria, she challenges me. She makes me want to conquer the world. You make me want to settle. The word settle hung in the air like poison. Isabel felt she might collapse, but something inside her, perhaps a maternal protective instinct, kept her on her feet. What about our baby? What about the nursery I've been preparing? What about the life we planned? Marcus's expression didn't soften. The baby will be fine. You'll be a good mother. But Victoria and I are going to build something bigger than you can imagine. That night, Isabel lay awake in her king-sized bed, listening to Marcus sleep peacefully beside her, as if nothing had changed. She stared at the ceiling, her hand moving in slow circles over her belly, whispering to her unborn daughter. "It's going to be okay, my girl. Mommy will figure this out. Mommy will protect you." The next morning, Marcus left for work early without a goodbye. Isabel had a prenatal appointment at 11, a routine checkup she had been looking forward to because Marcus had promised to attend. She called his office, but his secretary said he was in meetings all day. Dr. Martinez, Isabel's obstetrician, was concerned about her elevated blood pressure and stress levels. "Mrs. Serrano, I need you to take it easy. This kind of stress is not good for you or the baby." "I'm fine, doctor. Just some work pressure. Perhaps your husband could come to the next appointment. It's important for partners to be involved, especially as we get closer to birth." Isabel forced a smile. "He's very busy with his business, but I'll ask him after the appointment." Isabel drove through Central Park, taking the long way home. She needed time to think, to process, to figure out what to do next. The autumn leaves were turning brilliant shades of gold and red, and she tried to find peace in their beauty. She pulled into a small cafe and ordered a decaf latte, sitting by the window and watching young mothers ride strollers down the sidewalk. She made a decision. She would fight for her marriage. She would confront Victoria. She would remind Marcus of everything they had built together, everything they could still build. She wasn't going to let another woman destroy her family before it had truly begun. Isabel arrived home at 3 o'clock, feeling more determined than she had since she discovered the email. She walked upstairs to the second floor, planning to take a short nap before Marcus came home. As she reached the top of the stairs, she heard something that made her freeze. Music was playing from the nursery, not the soft classical music she often put on while arranging baby clothes, but loud, aggressive pop music that seemed to mock the gentle atmosphere she had so carefully created. Isabel's heart began to race. She had locked the nursery door before she left for her appointment, a habit she had developed because the room was so precious to her. Who could be inside? She crept up to the nursery door, which was slightly ajar, and what she saw made her gasp in horror. Victoria Ross was standing in the center of the room, beautiful and terrible, in a way that seemed almost unnatural. She wore a tight black dress and stiletto heels. Her dark hair flowed over her shoulders like a malevolent waterfall. In her hands, she held a can of red paint, and she was systematically destroying everything Isabel held dear. The hand-painted murals were covered in violent slashes of red paint. The word "unwanted" was scrawled across the wall, where Isabel had painted a mother holding her baby. The antique rocking chair was toppled over, its delicate upholstery slashed with what looked like a knife. The baby clothes were scattered across the floor, ripped and stained with paint, but the worst was yet to come. As Isabel watched in silent horror, Victoria raised a hammer and brought it down on the custom-made wooden crib, splintering the headboard that had been carved with dancing angels. "No!" Isabel screamed, running into the room. "Stop it! Please stop!" Victoria spun around, and her beautiful face was twisted with malicious satisfaction. "Oh, look! The pregnant princess is home. Get out of my house! Get out of my baby's room! Your baby's room!" Victoria laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Honey, there's no room for your baby in Marcus's future. He's mine now. This whole house will be mine soon." Isabel looked around at the destruction. Her hands shook as she took in the magnitude of what Victoria had done. 6 months of work, of love, of dreams, all destroyed in a single afternoon of rage. How could you do this? How could you destroy something so innocent? Because I need you to understand that Marcus chose me, not you, not your boring suburban dreams. Me. Victoria stepped closer, her heels crunching on the broken pieces of the wooden mobile that had hung over the crib. He gave me the key to this house. He told me to come here and make myself comfortable. So I did. You're lying! Victoria reached into her purse and pulled out a set of keys, dangling them mockingly in front of Isabel's face. Am I? These are the real deal, honey. Marcus gave them to me last week. He also gave me something else. From her purse, Victoria pulled out a small black velvet box. With a theatrical flourish, she opened it to reveal a stunning diamond ring. Not an engagement ring, but something even more precious. It was a push present, the kind of gift husbands gave their wives after the birth of their children. He bought it for me, Victoria purred, for when I give birth to his real children. Children who won't have to grow up knowing their father never loved their mother. Isabel felt she might faint. She grabbed the doorframe for support, her vision blurring with tears and shock. You're not pregnant. Not yet. But I will be. As soon as Marcus divorces you and marries me, we'll start our perfect family, the family he truly wants. As if summoned by their voices, footsteps sounded on the stairs. Marcus appeared in the doorway, and for a moment he seemed genuinely surprised by the scene before him. His eyes scanned the destroyed room, Victoria standing in the rubble with paint on her hands, and Isabel slumped against the wall, tears streaming down her face. Victoria, what the hell did you do? I did what needed to be done, Victoria responded coldly. I made it clear there's no place for her or her baby in our future. Isabel looked at her husband with desperate hope. Surely now he would see what kind of woman Victoria really was. Surely now he would throw her out and beg for Isabel's forgiveness. Instead, Marcus walked over to Victoria and put his arm around her waist. You shouldn't have done this here. What if the neighbors heard? Isabel's world completely fell apart. Her husband's concern was not for her pain or for her destroyed nursery. It was for what the neighbors might think. Marcus, Isabel whispered, look what she did to our baby's room. Look what she did to everything I made for our daughter. Marcus looked at the room with what seemed like mild irritation, as if someone had just rearranged the furniture in a way he didn't prefer. It's just stuff, Isabel. We can buy new things. It's not just stuff. This was our baby's first home. These were the walls she would have looked at as a child. This was the chair where I was going to nurse her and sing to her. Isabel, you're being hysterical. Pregnancy hormones make women emotional. The doctor, what's his name? Dr. Williams? He told us that. Victoria smiled in satisfaction. See, honey, she's exactly as dramatic as I told you she'd be. Marcus nodded, as if this confirmed something they had discussed many times. Victoria's right. You always make a big production out of everything. This is just a room. We'll hire someone to redecorate it. Redecorate it! Isabel's voice was rising almost to a shout. She destroyed everything. She destroyed 6 months of work. She destroyed things I made with my own hands for our daughter. Our daughter will be fine in any room. She won't remember what color the walls were. The casual cruelty of his words broke something fundamental inside of Isabel. She realized that the man she had loved, the man she had married, the father of her child, that man no longer existed, or he never had. Victoria stepped forward, her beautiful face radiating fake sympathy. Isabel, honey, this is actually a blessing. You get to start over. Maybe design a room that's more realistic, more fitting for a single mother's budget. Single mother? Isabel's voice was barely a whisper. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. Isabel, we need to talk about our future, about what's best for everyone. What's best for everyone is for you to throw this woman out of our house and remember that you have a wife and a baby on the way. I have a business empire to think about, Marcus responded coldly. Victoria understands that empire. She's part of it. You're just the woman who got pregnant at an inconvenient time." The words hit Isabel like physical blows. She slid down the wall until she was sitting on the floor, in the rubble of her dreams. Her arms wrapped protectively around her belly. Victoria knelt beside her with feigned concern. "Oh, honey, don't cry. I'm sure you'll find someone else eventually, someone more suited for a woman with your limitations." From her purse, Victoria took out a photograph and dropped it into Isabel's lap. It was an ultrasound image, just like the one Isabel had treasured from her own pregnancy. But this one had Victoria's name on it. "Surprise," Victoria whispered. "I'm 6 weeks pregnant with Marcus's baby, the baby he actually wants." Isabel stared at the ultrasound image, and suddenly everything was clear. This wasn't just an affair. This wasn't just a moment of weakness or a midlife crisis. This was a calculated takeover of her entire life. "The timing is perfect," Marcus said, his voice taking on the same tone he used in business meetings. "Victoria will have the baby only 6 months after yours. We can raise them together as one real family." "And me?" Isabel whispered. "You'll figure it out. You're smart. You'll be fine." Victoria stood up and dusted imaginary dirt from her black dress. "We should go, honey. I have a massage appointment at 4, and then we're meeting with the lawyer about, well, you know." They walked out of the destroyed room arm in arm, leaving Isabel sitting on the floor, surrounded by the shattered remnants of her dreams. She heard their voices echoing down the hallway. She heard Victoria's laughter blend with Marcus's deeper tones. She heard the front door close as they left for their massage and their lawyer. For a long time, Isabel remained motionless in the rubble. The baby kicked inside her, strong movements that seemed to say, "I'm still here, Mom. I'm still counting on you." Slowly and painfully, Isabel began to pick up the pieces. Not to clean them, that would come later, but to examine them, to understand exactly what had been taken from her. As she lifted a shard of the broken mobile, something caught her eye. In her purse, which Victoria had carelessly left behind in her dramatic exit, was a small recording device, the same kind Isabel had used when conducting interviews with clients for her design business. The red light was blinking, indicating it was still recording. Victoria, in her arrogance and her need to document her victory, had recorded the entire thing. Isabel picked up the device and held it carefully, as if it were made of the most precious crystal. For the first time since she had read that email, she smiled. "Oh, Victoria," she whispered to the empty room, "you have no idea what you just did." As the afternoon sun streamed through the broken remains of the nursery windows, Isabel Garcia Sterling began to plan. She was no longer just a pregnant woman who had been betrayed. She was a mother protecting her child. And they were all about to learn that there was nothing more dangerous in the world than a mother who had been pushed too far. The war had begun, and Isabel intended to win. The night after Victoria destroyed the nursery, Isabel didn't sleep. She sat in the window seat of the master bedroom, wrapped in a cashmere blanket, watching the city lights flicker below, while Marcus slept peacefully in their bed, as if nothing had changed. The recording device lay in her lap, like a weapon waiting to be deployed. She had listened to the recording, over and over. Each playback revealed new details. Victoria's confession about the fake pregnancy test she had shown Marcus, her boasts about how she had manipulated him to gain access to the company's finances, her detailed plans to remove Isabel from Marcus's life altogether. "The stupid bitch really thinks her little paintings matter," Victoria's voice crackled through the small speaker. "Once I'm Mrs. Serrano, I'm turning that pathetic art studio into a proper wine cellar, and that ridiculous nursery is going to be my walk-in closet." But the most damning revelation came near the end of the recording, when Victoria thought she was alone in the room. Phase 1 is complete. The nursery is destroyed, and she's broken. Phase 2. Get rid of her permanently. Marcus is too weak to do it himself, so I'll have to arrange something. A fall down the stairs during a pregnancy complication should do the trick. It will look natural. Isabel's hand moved protectively to her belly. Victoria wasn't just trying to steal her husband. She was planning to kill her. As the sun rose over New York City, Isabel made a decision that would change everything. She wasn't going to run. She wasn't going to hide. She was going to fight back with every weapon at her disposal. And she had more weapons than Victoria realized. The first step was investigation. While Marcus showered and got ready for another day of betraying his pregnant wife, Isabel used her laptop to access Angel's Legacy's corporate databases. Her fingers flew across the keyboard as she downloaded financial records, employee files, and internal communications. What she found made her gasp. Victoria Ross had been stealing from the company for months. Small amounts at first, a few thousand here and there from the marketing budget, explained away as influencer partnerships and social media campaigns. But recently, the amounts had grown more audacious. In the last 2 months alone, Victoria had rerouted over $200,000 from various company accounts to a personal account under the name Maria Santos. Isabel cross-referenced the name and found something even more shocking. Maria Santos was Victoria's real name, and she had a criminal record. 3 previous wealthy husbands, 3 similar patterns of seduction, theft, and mysterious accidents that left the wives either dead or missing. The woman who was living in Isabel's house, destroying her life, planning to murder her, was a professional con artist, and possibly a killer. Isabel printed everything and hid the documents in her old work portfolio, the one she had used during her design career. Then she dressed carefully in a navy maternity dress and pearls. She wanted to look respectable, trustworthy, like someone who deserved to be believed. Her first stop was the district attorney's office, where she requested a meeting with Detective Sarah Miller, a woman Isabel had met at a charity event who specialized in financial crimes and domestic violence cases. Detective Miller listened intently as Isabel laid out the evidence. The recording, the financial documents, the background check on Victoria. "Mrs. Serrano," Detective Miller said, her voice grave. "This woman you've described, we've been tracking someone who matches this description for 2 years. If she's the same person, she's wanted in connection with 3 suspicious deaths and an estimated $2 million in theft. What do I do? My husband doesn't believe me. He thinks I'm just jealous. First, stay safe. Do not confront her directly. Second, document everything. Keep recording conversations if you can. Third," Detective Miller paused, studying Isabel's face carefully. "Do you have a safe place to go? Family, friends she doesn't know about?" "Yes, my college roommate Anna lives in Philadelphia. But I can't just run away. This is my life, my home, my baby's future." "Mrs. Serrano, I understand your feelings, but—" "No," Isabel interrupted, surprising herself with the firmness of her voice. "I'm not going to run. I'm going to fight back. I need to know what evidence you need to arrest her." Detective Miller smiled for the first time during their meeting. "I like your spirit. Here's what we need." For the next hour, Detective Miller laid out a plan. Isabel would continue to document Victoria's activities while staying safely out of her way. The police would begin surveillance and work on building a case, but they needed more proof, particularly proof of the death threats and the financial theft. "There's one more thing," Detective Miller said, as Isabel got ready to leave. "Do you have any business connections who might be willing to help? Someone in Victoria's professional circle who might have noticed irregularities?" Isabel thought for a moment. Then she smiled. "I think I know exactly the right person." Daniel Smith had been in love with Isabel Garcia since their sophomore year at Columbia University. He was 2 years older, studying business while she was in fine arts, and he had spent countless hours in the library pretending to study while he was actually watching her sketch in her notebook. He had been planning to ask her out when she started dating Marcus Serrano, the charismatic MBA student who seemed to have everything Daniel lacked: confidence, family money, and the kind of aggressive ambition that drew attention. Daniel had stepped aside gracefully, but he never forgot Isabel. He built his own business empire, founding Cradle's Comfort, a boutique chain of baby stores that competed directly with Marcus's Angel's Legacy. While Angel's Legacy focused on luxury and excess, Cradle's Comfort emphasized craftsmanship, sustainability, and a genuine care for child development. Daniel's stores were smaller, but more profitable, and his company had been steadily gaining market share for 3 years. He was in his Philadelphia flagship store reviewing quarterly reports when his assistant announced that Isabel Serrano was on the phone. "Daniel." Isabel's voice was soft, uncertain. "I hope you don't mind me calling. I got your number from the Columbia alumni directory." "Isabel, of course I don't mind. How are you? How's the pregnancy going?" There was a pause, and when Isabel spoke again, Daniel could hear tears in her voice. "Daniel, I need help. I'm in trouble and I don't know who else to turn to." "Don't know who?" In 6 hours, Daniel was on a plane to New York. They met in a small cafe in the Soho neighborhood, far from Madrid's social circles where Victoria might spot them. Isabel had chosen a table in the corner where she could sit with her back to the wall, a precaution Detective Miller had suggested. Daniel arrived first. His heart broke when he saw Isabel walk in, 7 months pregnant, and clearly exhausted. She was still the most beautiful woman he had ever seen, but there was something different about her, a strength in her spine that hadn't been there in college. "Thank you for coming," Isabel said, as she carefully sat in the chair across from him. "Tell me everything." Isabel told him everything. The affair, the destroyed nursery, Victoria's true identity, the death threats, the financial theft. She showed him the documents, played parts of the recording, and watched as his expression grew darker with each revelation. "This woman," Daniel said finally, "this Victoria, I've heard of her. She tried to poach 3 of my key employees last year with offers that seemed too good to be true. We ran a background check and found some irregularities, so we decided not to hire her team." "What kind of irregularities?" "Financial. References that didn't check out. A gap in her work history she couldn't explain." Daniel leaned forward, his voice intense. "Isabel, I want to help you. Not just because of what this woman has done to you, but because she is clearly targeting successful businesses in our industry. If she's stealing from Angel's Legacy, she could come for Cradle's Comfort next." "What do you propose?" Daniel smiled, and for the first time in days, Isabel felt a flutter of hope. "I propose that we destroy her before she destroys anyone else, but we do it legally, thoroughly, and in a way that guarantees she never hurts another family again." For the next 2 hours, they developed a plan that was both brilliant and audacious. Daniel would use his business connections to investigate Victoria's activities throughout the industry. Isabel would continue to document evidence while keeping up the pretense of being a broken, defeated wife. Detective Miller would coordinate law enforcement activities, and when they had enough evidence, they would strike at the moment Victoria was most vulnerable and exposed. "There's one more thing," Daniel said, as they got ready to leave the cafe. "The Angel's Legacy flagship store opening is in 3 weeks. It's the biggest event in the baby industry this year. 500 VIP guests. Live stream, national media coverage. Victoria has been planning it for months. She sees it as her debut as Marcus's official partner. What if we make it her official downfall instead?" Isabel looked at Daniel, seeing not just the kind boy who had watched her sketch in the library, but a brilliant business leader who understood exactly how to wage this war. "Daniel, there's something you need to know. When this is over, when Victoria is gone, and Marcus, when my marriage is over, I'm going to need to rebuild my life, my career, Everything. You'll always have a place at Cradle's Comfort, Isabel. As a partner, not just as an employee. Your design skills combined with our business model could revolutionize the industry. For the first time since she had discovered Marcus's betrayal, Isabel felt genuinely excited about the future. Partners. Business partners. Daniel paused, then took her hand gently. I've been waiting 8 years to say this. Isabel, I've been in love with you since college. I know this isn't the right time, and I know you have a lot to get through. But when you're ready, if you ever are, I'll be here. Isabel looked at their joined hands, then back up at Daniel's earnest face. Ask me again after we destroy Victoria Ross. That night, Isabel returned home to find Marcus and Victoria in the living room, going over plans for the store opening. They were sitting close together on the couch, Victoria's hand resting possessively on Marcus's thigh. Papers spread across the coffee table like a battle plan. Oh, look, Victoria said with fake sweetness. The pregnant princess is home. How was your day, honey? More painting? More nesting? Just some errands, Isabel responded calmly. Doctor's appointment, some shopping. The usual. Marcus didn't even look up from the papers. Isabel, Victoria and I are working. Could you keep it down? Maybe watch TV in the bedroom. Of course, I wouldn't want to disturb anything important. Isabel walked up the stairs slowly, making sure her footsteps were audible. But instead of going into the bedroom, she slipped into the guest room that overlooked the living room and positioned herself carefully near the heating vent, where she could hear every word of their conversation. She's pathetic, Victoria was saying. Did you see how she just accepted being dismissed? She has no fight left. The pregnancy has made her emotional and weak. It's for the best, easier to handle the transition. Speaking of transitions, have you signed the divorce papers yet? My lawyer is finalizing them. I'll serve her after the store opening. I want that event to go off perfectly before we deal with the domestic stuff. Good, because I have a little surprise planned for the opening. Something that will make it very clear to everyone who the real Mrs. Serrano is. Isabel pressed the record app on her phone, her heart racing as she captured every word. What kind of surprise? Marcus asked. Let's just say that by the end of that night, Isabel will understand that she has no choice but to disappear. Quietly. Forever. Victoria, we talked about this. No violence. I won't be involved in anything that can be traced back to me. Don't worry, honey. It will look like an accident, a fall, a pregnancy complication. These things happen all the time. And afterward, you'll be free to marry me and start our real family. Marcus was silent for a long moment. So you're sure it will look natural, completely natural? I've done it before. Remember, huh? Know how to handle inconvenient wives. Isabel's blood ran cold. Victoria wasn't just planning to kill her. Marcus was actively participating in the plan. The man she had loved, the father of her child, was planning her murder. She crept back to his master bedroom and locked the door. Then she called Detective Miller's hotline. Detective, it's Isabel Serrano. I just recorded them planning my murder, and I think I know when they're going to do it. 3 weeks. She had 3 weeks to gather enough evidence to destroy both Victoria and Marcus before they destroyed her. 3 weeks to protect her unborn child and to build a new life from the ashes of her old one. Isabel looked in the bedroom mirror. The frightened, betrayed woman who had discovered her husband's affair was gone. In her place stood someone tougher, smarter, and infinitely more dangerous. Game on, she whispered to her reflection. The baby kicked as if in agreement. Mother and daughter were going to war together, and they were going to win. The morning of the Angel's Legacy flagship store opening dawned crisp and clear, with the kind of autumnal sun that made NYC look like a movie set. Fifth Avenue had been closed to traffic for 3 blocks. Red carpets had been rolled out, and security barriers erected to hold back the hundreds of photographers and reporters who were covering what industry magazines had dubbed the baby retail event of the decade. Inside the Serrano family penthouse, Victoria Ross stood in front of a full-length mirror, applying the finishing touches to her makeup. She wore a stunning white gown, deliberately bridal in its elegance, with a subtle cut that showed just a hint of her supposedly pregnant stomach. The dress had cost $15,000, charged to the Angel's Legacy marketing account as a promotional expense. "You look perfect," Marcus said, adjusting his black tuxedo in the mirror beside her. "Everyone will know you're the real Mrs. Serrano after tonight." "The only Mrs. Serrano soon," Victoria responded with a smile that was both beautiful and terrifying. 3 blocks away, in a nondescript hotel room, Isabel Serrano was sitting in front of a laptop, surrounded by Detective Miller, Daniel Smith, and a team of federal agents. Her 7.5-month pregnant belly made it impossible to sit comfortably, but the adrenaline had kicked in, sharpening her focus to a razor's edge. "Final communications check," Detective Miller said into her radio. "All units in position. Unit 1 confirms. We have eyes on the main entrance. Unit 2 confirms. Surveillance team is active and recording. Unit 3 confirms. Financial Crimes Division is on standby." Daniel handed Isabel a small device that looked like a compact mirror. "Press the button if you feel unsafe at any time. We'll have agents inside in 30 seconds. "I'll be fine," Isabel said, though her hands were shaking slightly. After tonight, Victoria Ross will never harm another family again. Detective Miller reviewed the plan one last time. "You'll enter the event at exactly 8:30 after the main introductions begin. Victoria will be on stage with Marcus, accepting congratulations and posing for photos. That's when you make your entrance. And the evidence? It's all loaded onto the USB drive Daniel gave you. Financial records, criminal background, recordings of Victoria planning your murder, and the recording device she accidentally left behind after destroying the nursery. When you plug that drive into the presentation system, it will display on all the store's screens and be live-streamed to every news outlet covering the event." Isabel nodded, her mind running through every detail of what was about to happen. She had spent 3 weeks preparing for this moment, gathering evidence, coordinating with law enforcement, and preparing for the performance of her life. "There's one more thing," Daniel said quietly, "about what happens after tonight. About us. Daniel, I know this isn't the time, but I need you to know that whatever you decide, whatever you need, I'll be here. As a business partner, as a friend." He paused. "As whatever you want me to be." Isabel looked at this man who had flown across the country to help her, who had risked his own business to fight her battles, who had loved her in silence for 8 years without asking for anything in return. "Ask me again tomorrow," she said softly, "when this is over." At exactly 8 o'clock, the doors to the new Angel's Legacy flagship store opened to reveal a wonderland of childhood dreams and parental fantasies. The 5-story building had been transformed into something between a palace and a theme park, with each floor dedicated to a different stage of child development. Crystal chandeliers hung over displays of diamond-encrusted cribs. A working carousel featured high-end strollers. The walls were covered with enlarged photographs of beautiful families, all featuring Marcus and Victoria as the perfect couple. The guest list read like a who's who of Spanish wealth and power. Tech billionaires mingled with movie stars. Politicians chatted with fashion designers. The press area was packed with reporters from every major news outlet. Their cameras were all focused on the grand staircase where Marcus and Victoria would make their entrance. At 8:15, Marcus Serrano appeared at the top of the staircase, resplendent in his custom-made tuxedo. The crowd applauded as he slowly descended, every inch the successful businessman celebrating his greatest triumph. Behind him, Victoria made her entrance like a movie star, her white dress flowing behind her as photographers captured her from every angle. "Ladies and gentlemen," Marcus spoke into a wireless microphone. His voice carried across the store, and was live-streamed to viewers around the world. Welcome to the future of childhood luxury. Welcome to Angel's Legacy Fifth Avenue. The crowd applauded enthusiastically as Victoria joined Marcus at the microphone. She placed her hand protectively over her belly in a gesture that was photographed by dozens of cameras. This store represents more than just a business success, Victoria said, her voice sweet and innocent. It represents the dreams Marcus and I share for our growing family. Soon, our own little angel will play in these halls, sleep in these cribs, and grow up surrounded by the love and luxury that every child deserves. The crowd murmured with delight at this public confirmation of what had been whispered in social circles for months. Marcus Serrano was leaving his pregnant wife for his beautiful young mistress, and tonight was their public debut as a couple. Before we go on, Marcus said, I want to take a moment to thank a very special someone, Victoria Ross, my brilliant chief of marketing, and the woman who made this night possible. Victoria, would you like to say a few words about our future together? Victoria stepped up to the microphone, her face glowing with triumph. I want to thank everyone for being here to celebrate this new beginning. Marcus and I are building more than a business empire. We're building a family legacy that will last for generations, and I want to be very clear about something. There's no place in our future for people who don't support our vision, our values, and our commitment to excellence. The subtext was clear to everyone in the room. The mysterious pregnant wife was officially being replaced. Victoria continued, her voice taking on a harder edge. Some people might try to hold on to the past, to slow down progress with jealousy and manipulation. But Marcus and I are committed to moving forward, together, no matter what obstacles we might face. She paused for dramatic effect, her hand still resting on her belly. In fact, I have an announcement to make. Marcus and I are... Excuse me. The voice came from the back of the crowd, soft but clear through the store's perfect acoustics. Heads turned, photographers swiveled their cameras, and a collective gasp went through the gathered guests. Isabel Serrano was standing in the main doorway, silhouetted against the lights of Fifth Avenue behind her. She wore a stunning navy silk maternity gown that accented rather than hid her 8-month pregnancy, and her dark hair was pulled back into an elegant bun. In her hand, she carried a small silver USB drive. She was not the broken, defeated woman Victoria expected to see. She was radiant, confident, and clearly very pregnant. I'm sorry to interrupt, Isabel said, walking slowly into the crowd as people parted to let her pass. But I think there are a few things these good people should know before they celebrate too enthusiastically. Marcus's face went white. Victoria's perfect composure cracked slightly, though she quickly recovered her smile. Isabel, Marcus said into the microphone, his voice carefully controlled. This is a private event. You were not invited. I'm your wife, Marcus, and this is my store too, at least according to the corporate documents I've been reviewing. Isabel had reached the bottom of the grand staircase, close enough now for all the cameras in the room to focus on the three of them. I believe your guests deserve to know the truth about what they're celebrating. Victoria leaned into the microphone, her voice dripping with fake concern. Everyone, please excuse Mrs. Serrano. Pregnancy can be very difficult, and it sometimes affects women's judgment and emotional stability. The crowd murmured with sympathy, exactly as Victoria had planned. Several people even nodded their heads. They all knew how irrational pregnant women could be. You're absolutely right, Victoria, Isabel said, with a smile that was pure steel. Pregnancy does affect a woman's judgment. It makes her very protective of her child. It makes her willing to do anything to ensure her baby's safety. She paused, looking directly at Victoria. And when someone threatens that baby, that's when you find out what a mother is truly capable of. She held up the USB drive for all to see. I have a few things I'd like to share with everyone. Some recordings, some documents, some very interesting information about the woman you're celebrating tonight. Security, Marcus barked, but Isabel was already moving. She walked past Marcus and plugged the USB drive into the main console of the presentation system. Immediately, the gigantic screens throughout the store lit up with documents, photographs, and audio controls. "Ladies and gentlemen," Isabel said, her voice now amplified through the store's sound system. "I'd like you to meet Maria Santos. That's Victoria's real name. She's wanted by the police in connection with 3 murders and an estimated $2 million in theft." The screens displayed Victoria's mugshot, along with her criminal record. The crowd gasped as they read the charges: fraud, embezzlement, suspicion of murder. "Stop it!" Victoria screamed, lunging at the console, but Isabel had anticipated it. "I wouldn't touch that if I were you," Isabel said calmly. "Not while everyone is watching." She pressed another button, and Victoria's voice filled the store. "I'm tired of hiding. I'm tired of pretending I respect that wife of yours while she waddles around the house playing house." The crowd listened in stunned silence as the recording played. Victoria's voice confessing to the affair, the fake pregnancy, the financial theft. But the worst was yet to come. Isabel played the recording from the living room 3 weeks earlier. Victoria's voice was crystal clear. "It will look like an accident, a fall, a pregnancy complication. These things happen all the time, and afterward, you'll be free to marry me and start our real family." Marcus's voice followed. "Are you sure it will look natural? Completely natural. I've done it before. Remember, I know how to handle inconvenient wives." The silence in the store was deafening. 500 of Spain's most powerful people had just listened to Marcus Serrano and his mistress plot to murder his pregnant wife. Victoria desperately tried to grab the microphone. "She's lying. Those recordings are fake. She's trying to frame me because she's jealous." But Isabel wasn't done. She pressed another button, and the screens filled with bank records showing exactly how Victoria had stolen money from Angel's legacy. Hundreds of thousands of dollars rerouted into fake accounts, phony payments to contractors, fake marketing expenses. "The police have been investigating you for 2 years, Maria," Isabel said, using Victoria's real name. "Did you really think you could get away with murdering me the same way you got away with murdering your other 3 husbands?" The crowd was backing away from Victoria now. Their faces were showing horror and disgust. Photographers were snapping every moment. Reporters were talking quickly into their phones. And social media was exploding with hashtags like #AngelsLegacyMurder and #PregnantWifeTakedown. Marcus tried to salvage the situation. "Everyone, please remain calm. This is clearly fabricated." "Is it, Marcus?" Isabel interrupted. "Then I'm sure you won't mind explaining to the police why you helped plan my murder. I'm sure you can explain why you gave Victoria access to company funds. I'm sure you can explain why you've been living a double life while your pregnant wife trusted you completely." Daniel Smith appeared at Isabel's side, having entered through a service entrance. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Daniel Smith, the CEO of Cradle's Comfort. I'm here to announce that Isabel Serrano has just become my business partner and co-owner of both Cradle's Comfort and Angel's Oa." The crowd gasped again. Isabel smiled at their shocked faces. "That's right," she said. "While you were celebrating Marcus and Victoria's fake romance, I was buying the majority share in this company. All of the major investors pulled out when they learned about the financial fraud and the murder plot. It turns out threatening to kill your pregnant wife is bad for business," Daniel said with a smirk. Marcus stared at her in complete shock. "That's impossible. You don't have that kind of money." "I have something better than money, Marcus. I have the truth, and I have friends who believe in justice." Isabel looked at the crowd of reporters and photographers. Daniel Smith's investment firm has purchased 60% of the outstanding shares of Angel's Legacy. As of tonight, I'm the majority owner of this company." Victoria was backing toward the exit now, her beautiful face twisted in rage and panic. "This isn't working. You can't prove anything. Nobody move." Federal agents streamed into the store from all entrances, their guns drawn and their badges clearly visible. Detective Miller appeared by the main staircase, speaking into a megaphone. "Maria Santos, also known as Victoria Ross, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, wire fraud, money laundering, and violation of federal racketeering statutes." Victoria tried to run, but there was nowhere to go. The store was surrounded, all exits blocked by law enforcement. She was tackled by 2 agents before she reached the door, her white dress tearing as she fought against the handcuffs. "Marcus Serrano," Detective Miller continued, "you're also under arrest as an accomplice to conspiracy to commit murder and as a co-conspirator in the financial crimes committed against Angel's legacy." Marcus stood frozen on the staircase as agents approached him, his face a mask of disbelief and terror. "This can't be happening. I'm Marcus Serrano. I'm a respected businessman." "You're a man who planned to murder his pregnant wife," Detective Miller responded as the cuffs clicked into place. "Respect is something you threw away." As Marcus and Victoria were led away in handcuffs, the crowd of guests stood in stunned silence. Then, slowly, someone began to applaud. Then another person joined in. Within seconds, the entire store was filled with thunderous applause as 500 people gave Isabel Serrano a standing ovation. Isabel stood on the grand staircase, one hand resting on her pregnant belly, the other holding Daniel's hand. The baby kicked hard, as if celebrating their victory. "Ladies and gentlemen," Isabel said into the microphone, her voice clear and confident across the store and to the millions watching the live stream, "Angel's legacy will continue to operate under new management. We will implement new policies focused on integrity, family values, and a genuine care for children and parents. And we will donate Marcus Serrano's personal profits from the last year to organizations that support victims of domestic violence." The applause grew even louder. Daniel stepped up to the microphone. "Cradle's Comfort and Angel's Legacy will be merging to create the largest and most ethical children's product retailer in the United States. Our first initiative will be the New Beginnings program, which will provide job training and support to women escaping abusive relationships." As the applause continued, Isabel felt the baby kick again, and she smiled. Her daughter would grow up in a world where justice was possible, where mothers could fight back and win, where the truth was more powerful than money or manipulation. The little girl who would have slept in the nursery Victoria destroyed would instead inherit a business empire built on love, integrity, and the unshakable strength of a mother's protection. Marcus Serrano and Victoria Ross were led away to face federal charges that would put them both in prison for decades. The store that was supposed to celebrate their triumph had become the scene of their downfall, and Isabel Serrano, who had been betrayed, threatened, and left for dead, stood victorious in the rubble of their plans, ready to build something better from the ashes of their greed. Justice, it turned out, was the most beautiful thing of all. 6 months later, the morning sun streamed through the massive windows of the new Angel's Legacy and Cradle's Comfort corporate headquarters in downtown Manhattan, casting a golden light on the nursery room where Isabel Garcia Smith sat in a rocking chair, cradling her 3-month-old daughter, Sophia Smith. The nursery was 10 times more beautiful than the one Victoria had destroyed. Instead of being hidden away in a private home, it was part of the executive floor of the company headquarters, a statement that mothers belonged in the business world, that children were not obstacles to success, but inspirations for it. Sophia was perfect in every way a baby could be perfect. She had Isabel's delicate features and Daniel's calm temperament, and she seemed to find everything in the world fascinating. At this moment, she was staring at the mobile of dancing angels that hung over her crib. A new one, handmade by the same artisan who had done the original, but even more intricate and beautiful. "Good morning, my little angel," Isabel whispered, stroking Sophia's soft, dark hair. "Today is a very special day. Today, Mommy and Daddy are going to show the world what we built together." The transformation of both companies had been nothing short of miraculous. Within 3 months of Marcus's arrest, Angel's Legacy and Cradle's Comfort had become the most profitable and fastest-growing children's product retailer in the country. The merger had eliminated redundancies, combined the best elements of both brands, and created a corporate culture focused on integrity and innovation. Isabel had proven to be a brilliant CEO. Her artistic vision, combined with Daniel's business acumen, had revolutionized everything from store design to product development. They had launched a line of eco-friendly baby furniture that was selling faster than they could make it. Their New Beginnings program had provided jobs and support to over 500 women escaping abusive relationships. The company's stock price had tripled, but beyond the business success, Isabel had built the life she had always dreamed of. She had married Daniel in a small ceremony in the New York Botanical Garden, with Sophia as their flower girl. She was carried down the aisle by Daniel's sister, since she was too small to walk. They lived in a penthouse overlooking Central Park, where Sophia's room looked out on the trees and playgrounds, where she would one day play. The best part was that Sophia would grow up knowing she was wanted, loved, and cherished by both of her parents. She would never doubt her place in the world, or wonder if she was valued. "Mrs. Garcia Smith," Daniel's voice came from the doorway, still formal during office hours, though they had been married for 2 months. "The press conference is ready to begin." Isabel looked at her husband and felt the same flutter of happiness she experienced every time she saw him. Daniel was everything Marcus had never been: kind, trustworthy, supportive, and completely devoted to both her and Sophia. He had legally adopted Sophia before their wedding, insisting that she needed a father who would always put her first. "How do I look?" Isabel asked, standing up carefully. She wore a stunning navy pantsuit that perfectly balanced professional authority with maternal warmth. Her hair was styled in an elegant updo, and she wore the pearl necklace Daniel had given her as a wedding gift. "Like the most powerful woman in New York City," Daniel responded. Then he smiled. "And the most beautiful." They walked together through the executive offices, past walls covered with pictures of happy families, inspirational quotes about motherhood and success, and framed articles about the company's remarkable turnaround. Employees smiled and waved as they passed, genuine smiles from people who were proud to work for a company that valued integrity. The press conference was being held in the main showroom of their flagship store, the same location where Victoria Ross had been arrested 6 months earlier. But today, the room was filled with celebration instead of scandal. Representatives from business magazines, parenting publications, and major news outlets had all gathered to hear Isabel's announcement about the company's expansion plans. As Isabel took the stage, carrying Sophia in her arms, the gathered reporters stood and applauded. The story of her triumph over betrayal and near murder had captivated the nation, inspiring millions of women and fundamentally changing conversations about corporate ethics and family values. "Thank you all for being here," Isabel began, her voice clear and confident. 6 months ago, I stood on this same spot as a pregnant woman whose life was being destroyed by people she trusted. Today, I'm here as a mother, a CEO, and living proof that justice, integrity, and love are more powerful than greed, betrayal, and evil. The audience clapped enthusiastically. Sophia, comfortable in her mother's arms, babbled happily at the lights and cameras. "When Victoria Ross destroyed my baby's room, she thought she was destroying my future. When she planned to murder me, She thought she was clearing the way for her own success. What she didn't understand is that mothers are the most dangerous opponents in the world, not because we're violent, but because we are relentless in protecting our children. Isabel looked down at Sophia, who was trying to reach the microphone with her chubby little hands. This little girl will grow up in a world where companies are held accountable for their actions, where families are valued above profit, and where women can build empires while raising children. She will inherit a business built on the foundation of her mother's refusal to accept injustice. Daniel joined Isabel on stage, placing his arm around his wife and daughter. Today, we're announcing the opening of 50 new Angels Legacy and Cradles Comfort stores across the country, Daniel said. Each one will include an employee childcare center, a community space for new mothers, and a donation center for families in need. We are proving that business success and social responsibility are not just compatible. They are inseparable. A female reporter raised her hand. Mrs. Garcia Smith, what would you say to other women who might be facing similar situations? Betrayal, abuse, threats? Isabel considered the question carefully. I would tell them that they are stronger than they think they are, that they deserve more than they're getting, and that there are people who will help them fight back. I would tell them that justice might not come quickly, but it will come if you are persistent and smart about seeking it. She paused, looking directly into the cameras that were live streaming around the world. Most importantly, I would tell them that surviving betrayal isn't enough. You have to thrive beyond it. You have to build something so beautiful, so successful, and so meaningful that the people who tried to destroy you realize they only made you stronger. Another reporter asked, have you had any contact with your ex-husband or Victoria Ross since their arrest? Marcus and Victoria are serving long federal prison sentences. Marcus was convicted of conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, and racketeering. He received 25 years. Victoria, or Maria Santos, as her real name turned out to be, was convicted of murder, attempted murder, fraud, and running a criminal enterprise. She received life without parole. Isabel's voice remained steady and professional, showing no emotion as she gave this information. I did receive a letter from Marcus about a month after Sophia was born. He wrote to say he was sorry for everything he had done, and that he hoped Sophia grew up to be as strong as her mother. I did not respond. My daughter and I have moved on with our lives, and have no intention of looking back. The final question came from a young female reporter. What advice would you give to young women who want to have successful careers and families? Isabel smiled, kissing the top of Sophia's head. I would tell them that it's not only possible, it's powerful. Being a mother doesn't make you weak, distracted, or less capable in business. It makes you fierce, focused, and absolutely unstoppable. When you're building something for your children, when you're creating a better world for them to inherit, there is no limit to what you can achieve. When the press conference ended and the reporters filed out to write their stories, Isabel and Daniel went back to their offices with Sophia. The baby was starting to get sleepy, so Isabel settled into the rocking chair in the executive nursery while Daniel reviewed the afternoon schedule. Board meeting at 3, he said, sitting on the arm of the rocking chair. The architects want to pitch the designs for the Barcelona flagship store at 4, and we have a dinner with the London expansion investors at 7. Isabel murmured, watching as Sophia's eyes fluttered shut. And somewhere in there, I need to pump, review the quarterly reports, and approve the new ad campaign. You know, Daniel said softly, when I was in college, watching you sketch in the library, I never imagined that someday we would be running a company together, raising a baby together, changing the world together. Isabel looked at him with eyes full of love and contentment. Ask me again. Ask you what again? The question you've wanted to ask me every day for the last 6 months. Daniel's face lit up with understanding. He slid off the arm of the chair and knelt beside them, taking Isabel's free hand in both of his. "Isabel Garcia Smith, you are the most extraordinary woman I've ever met. You are brilliant, beautiful, fierce, and kind. You are an incredible mother and an inspiring leader. Will you allow me to love you and Sophia for the rest of our lives? Will you build this empire with me? Will you raise our children together and show the world what a real partnership looks like?" "Yes," Isabel whispered, tears of joy streaming down her face. "Yes to all of it. Yes, forever." Daniel kissed her softly. Then he rested his forehead against hers. "I love you. I've loved you for 8 years, and I'll love you for 80 more." Sophia stirred in her mother's arms, opening her eyes and looking at the two people who loved her most in the world. She babbled happily, as if she understood that she was a part of something beautiful, permanent, and good. That night, as Isabel stood in the nursery watching Sophia sleep in her crib, she thought about the journey that had brought them to this moment. The pain of Marcus's betrayal, the terror of Victoria's threats, the long nights of gathering evidence and plotting her counterattack. It had all led her to this perfect life, with this perfect family. The woman who had once cowered in a destroyed room, whose dreams had been shattered by jealousy and greed, was gone. In her place stood someone stronger, wiser, and infinitely more powerful. Someone who had taken the worst betrayal imaginable and transformed it into the greatest possible triumph. Sophia would grow up hearing the story of how her mother had fought impossible odds and won. She would learn that women could be gentle and fierce, loving and powerful, protective and unstoppable. She would inherit not just a business empire, but a legacy of strength, justice, and the unshakable belief that good would ultimately triumph over evil. As Isabel turned off the nursery lights and headed to her bedroom, where Daniel was waiting for her, she smiled at the irony of it all. Victoria Ross had thought she was destroying Isabel's future when she ruined that first room. Instead, she had awakened a giant, and now the entire world knew exactly what happened when someone was foolish enough to threaten a mother's child. They lost everything, and the mother gained it all.
If a man can spend millions to protect his image, why couldn't he spend 1 second to protect the woman carrying his child? The Metropolitan Museum Charity Gala was supposed to be the crown jewel of New York's social calendar, a night where the city's wealthiest came together under the glitter of crystal chandeliers, the hum of polite laughter, and the intoxicating perfume of power. It was a place where fortunes could be made with a handshake, reputations secured with a toast, and scandals quietly buried under a mountain of champagne. But on this particular evening, one scandal would refuse to be buried. Damian Westwood, a man who had made his fortune predicting market trends and manipulating them to his advantage, stood at the center of it all. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a streak of silver at his temples that only made him more distinguished, he was the sort of man who commanded a room just by existing in it. Tonight, his custom Tom Ford tuxedo fit like a glove, his cufflinks glinting in the chandelier light, as though they too recognized the importance of the man wearing them. Beside him, in a deep sapphire gown that draped elegantly over her 5-month pregnant belly, stood Regan Westwood. She wasn't just his wife, at least not in her mind. She was his partner, his anchor, the woman who had stood beside him through every late-night strategy session, every nerve-wracking board vote, every champagne celebration when another deal closed. And yet, in recent months, Regan had begun to feel like nothing more than a prop in his life. A silent ornament he paraded around when it suited him. And then there was her, Roxanne Croft. 26, blood-red silk clinging to her surgically sculpted body, her lipstick a perfect match for the gown. She was everything Regan wasn't, at least that's what Damian seemed to think. Young, intoxicating, dangerous in the way a flickering flame tempts a moth to its doom. She had started as a junior marketing associate at Westwood Holdings, but had risen through the ranks in a way that had nothing to do with her work performance. Reagan knew all about Roxanne. She'd known for 6 months. She'd overheard the hushed late-night phone calls, smelled the unfamiliar perfume on Damien's suits, and noticed the subtle but undeniable shift in the way he looked at her. She had been patient, too patient, telling herself that if she confronted him, she needed proof that no one could deny. And tonight, proof was walking toward her in a pair of 6-inch stilettos. It started innocently enough, or at least as innocently as 2 women meeting in a room full of photographers could be. Roxanne didn't smile as she approached, but she didn't sneer either. Instead, she gave Reagan a slow, assessing look, like a predator sizing up a potential rival. "Reagan," she said, her voice dripping with mock sweetness, "you look radiant." Reagan smiled tightly, the kind of smile that photographs well but doesn't reach the eyes. "Thank you. Pregnancy will do that to you." Before Roxanne could respond, Damien's voice cut through the air, low and irritated. "Reagan, could you step aside for a moment? You're blocking the photographers." It wasn't just what he said, it was how he said it, as if she were a nuisance, an obstacle between him and the image he wanted to project. The crowd didn't hear the sharpness in his tone, but they saw what happened next. Reagan stepped back, and Damien, whether through frustration or carelessness, placed his hand on her shoulder and shoved her. It wasn't a violent shove, not enough to knock her over, but it was enough to make her stumble, enough for the cameras to catch her steadying herself against the back of a gold-plated chair, enough for the collective gasp of those nearest to them to ripple outward like a wave. Flashbulbs popped, gasps turned into whispers, and in that moment, Reagan understood something crystal clear. He wasn't worried about her feelings, her dignity, or even the fact that she was carrying his child. He was worried about Roxanne, about pleasing her. Reagan's heart pounded in her chest, her cheeks flushed with humiliation, but her mind was sharp as glass. She didn't yell, she didn't cry. Instead, she straightened her shoulders, smoothed the fabric of her gown, and fixed Damien with a look so cold it could have frozen the champagne in his glass. "Smile, Damien," she said softly enough that only he could hear. "The cameras are watching." And they were, more than either of them realized. What Damien didn't know was that Reagan had been planning for this. She had suspected he might do something humiliating tonight. The tiny camera sewn into the clasp of her clutch was already recording. Every sneer, every whispered insult, every casual display of disrespect. It was all there, captured in crystal clear high definition. She wasn't sure, even as she stood there, whether she would use it. Maybe she would save it for the divorce proceedings she could feel coming. Maybe she would keep it as a reminder of the moment she decided she was done. But when she saw Roxanne's smug little smirk as Damien guided her toward the stage for the evening's keynote speech, the decision was made. There would be no quiet divorce, no silent exit, no amicable parting for the press to sugarcoat. Reagan Westwood was going to burn it all down. She slipped away from the main hall, her steps purposeful, her hand tightening around the clutch that now held more power than any stock portfolio. She could already picture it. Every news outlet in the city scrambling to get the footage, every gossip blog running it on loop, every business rival salivating over the chance to watch Damien Westwood squirm. The thought made her pulse quicken, not with fear, but with something else, anticipation. In a few hours, Damien's perfect little world would come crashing down around him. He just didn't know it yet. And as Reagan stepped out into the cool night air, the city lights shimmering like 1,000 tiny witnesses, she couldn't help but smile. Because the only thing more dangerous than a woman scorned was a woman scorned with proof. What Damien didn't realize was that by morning, the entire world would see exactly who he was, thanks to the woman he thought was powerless. Before the gala, before the shove, before the carefully hidden camera in her clutch, Reagan Westwood had been someone else. She wasn't born into the polished high society world she now navigated so effortlessly. Reagan Davies grew up in a small coastal town in Maine, the kind of place where everyone knew your name and your business, whether you wanted them to or not. Her father, a high school history teacher, and her mother, a nurse at the local clinic, raised her with old-fashioned values: Work hard, be kind, keep your word. Money was always tight, but their home was rich in warmth and love. From an early age, Reagan stood out, not just for her delicate features or her warm hazel eyes, but for her sharp mind. She excelled in school, earning a scholarship to Columbia University in New York City. It was there, amid the noise and energy of Manhattan, that she first felt the intoxicating pull of ambition. She majored in art history, dreaming of one day becoming a curator for one of the city's great museums. She was in her second year of graduate school when she met Damian Westwood. It was at a charity auction hosted by a mutual acquaintance. Reagan had been there to volunteer, standing at the check-in table in a simple black dress and borrowed heels. Damian had been there to spend more on a single bottle of Bordeaux than she paid in rent for a year. He noticed her almost immediately, sauntering over between bidding wars with that lazy confidence of a man who knew the world would bend for him. "Which painting would you choose if you could have any of them?" he asked, his voice a low, rich baritone that seemed to hum through her. She laughed nervously, caught off guard. "I'm not sure I could pick just one." "That's the difference between you and me," he said with a smile that felt like a spotlight. "I always know exactly what I want." By the end of the night, she had his business card in her purse and a flurry of texts lighting up her phone. He was relentless. Lavish dinners, surprise tickets to Broadway shows, weekend trips to the Hamptons. At first, Reagan told herself it was just fun, that she wasn't ready for something serious. But Damian had a way of making her feel like she was the center of the universe, and eventually, she let herself believe it. Their romance was a whirlwind. Within a year, he proposed at the top of the Empire State Building, the city spread out below them like a promise. He slipped a diamond ring onto her finger that glittered almost as much as the tears in her eyes. A few months later, they were married in a ceremony that made the society pages, a seaside estate, strings of fairy lights, her mother crying softly in the front row. For a while, married life was good. Damian encouraged her to leave her job at the gallery, telling her she didn't need to work anymore. "Focus on us," he said. "On the family we're going to build." And Reagan, swept up in the fantasy, agreed. At first, she didn't mind. Their home was a penthouse with views of Central Park, every corner decorated with pieces they'd chosen together. She spent her days hosting charity luncheons, redecorating rooms on a whim, and attending Damian's business events. She told herself it was temporary, that one day she'd return to her career. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, her life became less about what she wanted and more about what Damian needed. If he had a late-night meeting, she waited up for him. If he had a bad day, she rearranged her schedule to make his favorite dinner. When he started spending more time at the office, she told herself it was just the demands of a growing company. Then came the first lie. A late business dinner that didn't line up with the expense receipt she found in his jacket pocket. The faint scent of perfume she didn't own clinging to his collar. When she asked him about it, he laughed and kissed her forehead. "You've been reading too many tabloids, sweetheart." She wanted to believe him. She did believe him, for a while. But the cracks were spreading. He began to grow impatient when she asked questions, dismissive when she voiced concerns. When she told him she was pregnant, his reaction was muted. He said all the right words. "That's wonderful news. We'll be such great parents." But there was a flicker in his eyes she couldn't quite place. As her belly grew, so did her isolation. He attended fewer doctor's appointments, citing work obligations. He spent more nights networking, more weekends at conferences. When she suggested they take a short trip before the baby arrived, he said he was too busy. And then she met Roxanne. It was purely by accident. Reagan had stopped by the Westwood Holdings offices to drop off a signed charity agreement, only to find Roxanne perched casually on the edge of Damian's desk, laughing at something on his phone. The way they looked at each other told Reagan everything she needed to know. The confrontation that followed was icy and calculated. Damian didn't deny knowing Roxanne, but insisted she was just a talented employee. When Reagan pressed, his voice hardened. "You're overreacting. You're hormonal. Maybe focus on the baby instead of inventing problems." It was then that Reagan realized something important. He wasn't going to protect her, not from humiliation, not from betrayal. If anything, he expected her to protect him, his image, his reputation, his precious empire. So she began to protect herself instead. She quietly contacted an attorney. She met with a tech-savvy friend from her Columbia days, someone who specialized in discreet security devices. That's how she came to have a camera hidden in the clasp of her clutch at the gala. She wasn't looking for a fight, but if one came, she wanted the world to see it exactly as it happened. Still, a part of her had hoped it wouldn't come to that. That maybe, just maybe, Damien would see her standing beside him in that sapphire gown and remember why he had fallen in love with her in the first place. But love had nothing to do with the man he had become. As she sat in the back of the town car on the way to the gala that night, the baby kicking gently against her ribs, she thought about the girl from Maine who had dreamed of art museums and quiet mornings by the sea. She wondered how that girl had ended up here, hurt, angry, and carrying the child of a man who no longer saw her. What she didn't know was that by the end of the night, she wouldn't just be the woman Damien shoved in front of a room full of cameras. She would be the woman who turned that shove into the most devastating weapon he'd ever faced. Because this wasn't just going to be a scandal, it was going to be his ruin. The Metropolitan Museum Charity Gala was an event that thrived on spectacle. Everything about it was designed to dazzle. The sweeping marble staircase lined with orchids, the gold-trimmed champagne flutes, the way the light from the crystal chandeliers scattered across the room like shattered stars. It was the kind of night where old money mingled with new money, where politicians, actors, CEOs, and socialites brushed shoulders under the pretense of philanthropy. The truth was, the gala was as much about power as it was about charity. It was a battlefield disguised in velvet and diamonds. Reagan Westwood had attended many of these events before. Usually she was a willing participant, gliding through the room on Damien's arm, offering warm smiles to his investors, making small talk with their wives. But tonight felt different. Tonight, she was here for one reason, to see if her suspicions about Damien's public loyalty, or lack thereof, would be confirmed. The moment she stepped into the grand hall, she felt the familiar wave of attention ripple through the crowd. Her sapphire gown, chosen for its elegance rather than ostentation, hugged her gently growing belly. Her hair was swept into a soft chignon, a few loose strands framing her face. The diamond pendant at her throat caught the light with every step. Damien walked beside her, his hand resting lightly at the small of her back. To anyone watching, they looked like the perfect couple. But Reagan knew his touch was a calculated gesture, not an affectionate one. He was performing for the cameras. They hadn't even made it to their table before the first photographer stopped them. "Mr. and Mrs. Westwood, one for the Wall Street Journal?" the man asked, already raising his camera. Damien's smile was instant, his posture straightening as though he were preparing for a magazine cover. Reagan smiled too, but she knew the difference between their smiles. His was a brand, hers was a mask. As they moved deeper into the hall, Reagan began to notice the glances. Women leaning toward each other to whisper, men casting quick looks between her and something, or someone, else. She followed the invisible line of their eyes, and that's when she saw her. Roxanne Croft was seated at a table near the stage, her blood-red gown a deliberate contrast to Reagan's serene blue. The fabric clung to her like it had been painted on. Every curve accentuated, every movement a subtle performance. Her lipstick matched the dress perfectly. Her smile too wide, too knowing. Reagan's heart didn't race. It didn't sink. Instead, it settled into a slow, steady rhythm, the kind that came before a storm. She adjusted the clutch in her hand, making sure the tiny hidden camera's lens had a clear view of the room. Damien spotted Roxanne at almost the same moment. His hand dropped from Reagan's back, his steps unconsciously veering toward the other woman. He masked it quickly, redirecting their path to the VIP section, but Reagan caught the slip. It was all the confirmation she needed. He hadn't come here to be by her side. He had come here for Roxanne. At the VIP table, the air was thick with the scent of money, expensive cologne, designer fabrics, rare floral arrangements. Damien immediately began working the room, shaking hands with CEOs, laughing a little too loudly at jokes that weren't funny. Reagan took her seat, offering polite conversation to the guests on either side of her. But her attention was always drifting back toward Roxanne. And then it happened. Roxanne rose from her table, her every movement dripping with confidence, and crossed the room toward them. Conversations paused subtly, eyes tracking her progress like the slow, hypnotic movement of a predator. When she reached their table, Damien stood to greet her. He didn't introduce her to Reagan. He didn't have to. The tension between the three of them was its own introduction. "Roxanne," he said smoothly, his smile bordering on intimate. "Glad you could make it." "Wouldn't miss it," she replied, her gaze flicking briefly, dismissively to Reagan before returning to Damien. Reagan kept her face neutral, her hands resting lightly on her lap. She knew she was being watched, not just by Roxanne and Damien, but by everyone within earshot. This wasn't just a social interaction. This was theater, and she was expected to play her part. "Lovely to see you again," Reagan said evenly. "Of course," Roxanne replied, her tone just shy of patronizing. Before Reagan could respond, one of Damien's investors approached with a group of colleagues. "Damien, we were just talking about that Westwood Holdings expansion into Dubai." Damien's attention snapped back to the men, his eyes lighting up. He excused himself from the table, gesturing for Reagan to move so he could stand beside the investor. And that's when it happened. It was subtle, almost casual, but in front of a room full of people, it might as well have been broadcast on a giant screen. As Reagan began to shift her chair, Damien's hand pressed against her shoulder, not in a guiding gesture, but in a firm push to move her faster. The chair leg caught on the thick carpet, and she stumbled slightly, as like steadying herself against the back of another chair. There was a small gasp from someone nearby. A few people looked away quickly, pretending they hadn't seen. Others leaned closer, their eyes bright with the thrill of gossip. Damien didn't notice. Or maybe he didn't care. He was already deep in conversation with the investor, his back to Reagan. But her hidden camera noticed. The lens in her clutch had captured the moment perfectly. The push, the stumble, the way she caught herself without a word. It also caught Roxanne's expression, the faint upward twitch of her lips, the satisfaction in her eyes. Reagan sat back down, her heart pounding, not from embarrassment but from clarity. There was no saving this marriage. No pretending it was just a bad night or a misunderstanding. And as the orchestra began to play a soft waltz, couples moving to the dance floor, Reagan knew the evening was far from over. The most important moment hadn't happened yet. She just had to wait for the perfect time to act. Because once she walked out of this gala, Damien Westwood's carefully curated empire would start to crumble, and it would all begin with what was hidden inside her clutch. The moment Damien's hand pressed against Reagan's shoulder and sent her stumbling, the energy in the room shifted. It wasn't loud, it wasn't violent, but it was unmistakable. The closest guests pretended to focus on their champagne, their eyes darting toward her in quick, furtive glances. Others whispered behind manicured hands. The gala orchestra played on, but the lilting waltz now seemed to underscore the tension rather than mask it. Reagan's cheeks flushed, but not from shame. It was anger, controlled, contained, sharpened into something she could wield. She eased herself back into her chair, adjusting her gown as though nothing had happened. Her hand brushed the clutch in her lap, feeling the hidden camera still recording. Across the table, Roxanne sipped her champagne, the corner of her mouth curling in a way that said she saw it, she liked it. Damien didn't look at Reagan at all. He was leaning toward the investor, his voice loud enough to carry over the music, animated as he talked about profit margins and international markets. Reagan let her eyes sweep the room, committing every witness to memory. The wife of a hedge fund manager sitting 2 tables over, the society columnist with her notebook tucked discreetly under the table, the junior photographer snapping candids from the side of the room. They had all seen. And that was good. That was very good. A waiter appeared beside her, refilling her glass with practiced grace. "Are you all right, Mrs. Westwood?" he asked quietly, his brow creased in genuine concern. "I'm fine," she said softly, offering a small smile. "Thank you." But inside, she was making calculations. This wasn't the kind of humiliation that could be brushed off or spun into a misunderstanding. In the world they lived in, perception was reality, and Damien had just handed her a weapon. The evening dragged on. Damien returned to the table briefly, only to excuse himself again a few minutes later to circulate. Reagan knew exactly where he was going before she even looked. Sure enough, he ended up near Roxanne's table, bending slightly toward her as she leaned in with a hand resting lightly on his forearm. Reagan's phone buzzed in her clutch. She discreetly glanced at the screen. It was a text from her attorney. "Did you get what we talked about?" Her thumb hovered over the keyboard. "Yes," she typed, and more. She slid the phone away just as one of the gala's hosts tapped the microphone to announce the evening's auction winners. Damien returned to escort her to the stage for a photo with the other donors. His hand settled at her back again, the pressure just enough to remind her that in his mind she was a prop. The photographer counted down, 3, 2, 1, and the flash went off. Damien smiled wide, teeth perfect, eyes bright. Reagan smiled too, but hers was different. Hers was a smile that said, "You have no idea what's coming." When they returned to their table, she excused herself to the restroom. Instead of heading there, she took a sharp turn toward the quiet corridor that led to the gala's media office. It was a small room tucked away from the main event, used by the press team to manage event coverage and release official photos to the media in real time. She knew the woman in charge, Harper Lane, a junior publicist who'd once interned for a friend of Reagan's. Harper's eyes widened when she saw her. "Mrs. Westwood, is everything okay?" Reagan set her clutch on the desk and opened it just enough to slide out a small memory card. "I need this sent to 3 outlets immediately," she said quietly. "The New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and Page 6. Tell them they'll want to see it before midnight. No questions, Harper. Just do it." Harper hesitated, glancing at the clutch. "Is it?" "Yes," Reagan said simply. "And make sure the footage stays unedited." Harper swallowed hard, then nodded. "Consider it done." Reagan returned to the gala floor as though nothing had happened. Damien was laughing at something Roxanne had said, his hand resting just a little too casually on the back of her chair. Reagan crossed the room, reclaiming her seat without so much as a glance at them. The rest of the night unfolded in a blur of speeches, applause, and the muted chime of champagne glasses. But beneath the surface, Reagan could feel the current shifting. By the time dessert was served, she saw the first sign, an unfamiliar man at the far end of the room glancing down at his phone, then up at her, then back to his phone again. It had begun. Damien didn't notice. He was too busy enjoying the attention of the younger woman by his side. When the gala finally wound down, he offered Reagan a perfunctory hand to help her from her chair. "Let's go," he said, his tone more command than request. They stepped out into the crisp night air, the city skyline glittering against the dark. A black town car waited at the curb. Damien slid in first, tapping at his phone before the door even closed. Reagan settled beside him, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Halfway back to their penthouse, Damien's phone began to buzz incessantly. He glanced at the screen, his brow furrowing. Then another buzz. And another. "What the hell?" he muttered, opening the first message. His jaw tightened. Reagan looked out the window, hiding her smile. She knew what he was seeing. The clip of him shoving his pregnant wife at the gala, captured in perfect clarity, now bouncing from one news outlet to another, already trending on social media with hashtags that would burn his image into the public's memory for all the wrong reasons. By the time they reached their building, his phone was still buzzing, his face a mask of cold fury. "Did you?" he began, but she cut him off. "I told you to smile tonight, Damien," she said softly, stepping out of the car. "Now the whole world gets to see it." And she knew this was just the beginning, the first domino in the chain that would bring his empire crashing down. The elevator ride up to the Westwood penthouse was silent, except for the soft hum of machinery. Damien stood beside Reagan, his jaw clenched, his phone in his hand, thumbs flying over the screen. The building's mirrored walls reflected their image back at them. Him, rigid and seething, her, serene on the outside but fraying on the inside. When the elevator doors slid open, Damien stepped out first, muttering something about damage control. Reagan followed at a measured pace, every step echoing against the marble floors of the sprawling apartment. The space was immaculate, a testament to her obsessive eye for detail, but tonight it felt like a stage set. Beautiful, hollow, lifeless. The moment Damien disappeared into his office and shut the door, Reagan's composure cracked. She walked past the glittering city view and into the master bedroom, closing the door behind her. Her hands shook as she unclasped the diamond pendant at her throat, letting it fall onto the dresser with a soft clink. She slipped out of the sapphire gown, carefully hanging it in the closet, then collapsed onto the edge of the bed in her silk slip. That's when the tears came. They weren't loud or dramatic. They were quiet, relentless, the kind that come from a place deeper than sadness. She pressed the heels of her hands against her eyes, willing herself to stop, but the images wouldn't leave her. Damien's dismissive shove, Roxanne's smirk, the cold glances from people who had once called her a friend. The baby kicked gently, as if sensing her distress. Reagan's hand went instinctively to her stomach. "It's okay," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I promise I'll take care of us. I won't let him take anything more from me." But promises were easier to make than to keep. For the next hour she sat there in the dimly lit bedroom, staring at nothing, listening to the faint sound of Damien pacing in his office and barking into his phone. She could imagine the calls. His publicist, his lawyer, maybe even Roxanne. He would be spinning the story already, trying to twist it into something harmless. A misunderstanding, maybe. She knew him well enough to know he'd try to turn it back on her. He'd say she was overreacting, that she'd embarrassed him by making a scene, that the video had been doctored. The thought made her stomach churn. Finally, she rose and crossed to the vanity, catching sight of her reflection in the mirror. Her eyes were swollen, her makeup smudged. She barely recognized the woman staring back at her. "This isn't who you are," she told her reflection quietly. But the truth was, she didn't entirely believe it. Not yet. The weight of the years they'd spent together pressed down on her. The dinners, the galas, the endless compromises. She had given up her career, her independence, her identity, all in the name of building a life together. And what had it gotten her? Public humiliation and a marriage that was nothing but a transaction to him now. For a fleeting moment, she wondered if she should have kept her head down, swallowed her pride, and endured it for the sake of the child. After all, walking away from Damien Westwood meant walking away from the lifestyle, the security, the connections. It meant starting over while 6 months pregnant. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. She picked it up to find a text from her mother in Maine. "Saw something on the news. Are you okay?" Reagan hesitated, then typed back, "I'm fine. Don't worry." She hit send, then tossed the phone aside. The last thing she needed was her mother worrying, or worse, offering to come stay with her. This was something she needed to handle on her own. She went into the bathroom, splashing cold water on her face, forcing her mind to slow down. Her gaze fell on the framed photo by the sink. Her and Damien at last year's gala, arms around each other, smiling like they actually meant it. She turned it face down. For a few minutes she let herself crumble. She sat on the cool tile floor, knees drawn up, breathing in deep, uneven gulps. She thought about the girl she'd been when she met him, full of hope, believing she'd found someone who would cherish her forever. Then she thought about the woman she was now, tired, betrayed, and holding the most damning piece of evidence she could ever have against him. That's when something shifted. The tears stopped, her breathing evened out. She stood, straightened her slip, and walked back into the bedroom. She picked up her phone again, not to call her mother, but to open the encrypted folder where the full gala footage was stored. She watched it once, start to finish. The shove, the stumble, the look on Roxanne's face. Damien's complete lack of concern. It was all there, undeniable. Her breakdown was over. The woman who had cried on the bed an hour ago was gone. In her place was someone colder, sharper, more dangerous. She opened her messages and typed to her attorney, "Send the preliminary divorce papers. We're not negotiating quietly." Then she sent another message to Harper, the publicist. "Keep feeding the footage to every outlet that wants it. Let them run it on a loop." She could almost feel her old self returning. The woman who'd fought her way out of a small town to earn a spot at Columbia. The woman who'd once been strong enough to stand on her own. She had lost that part of herself somewhere along the way, but now it was clawing its way back. In the distance, she could hear Damien's voice still raised on a call. She smiled faintly. Let him scramble. Let him panic. Because the truth was, Tonight had only been the opening move. What came next would make the shove look like a footnote in a much larger story, one where Reagan Westwood held every card, and for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel broken. She felt powerful. Damian Westwood thought he knew everything about his wife. He knew her favorite wine, the perfume she wore, the way she smiled for photographs without showing all her teeth. He knew she had a degree in art history, that she'd grown up in Maine, that she had no family in New York except for him. He knew she wasn't wealthy in her own right, not by his standards anyway, and that her life before him had been modest. Or at least, that's what he believed. What Damian didn't know was that Reagan Westwood, née Davies, was far more than the elegant ornament he thought he'd married. When she sat in the quiet of the master bedroom that night, divorce papers on the way, Reagan began making calls. The first was to her attorney, Michael Ames, a man Damian had met only once and dismissed as a small-time legal guy. Michael wasn't small-time. He was an expert in corporate law, with a reputation for dismantling corrupt empires brick by brick. He also owed Reagan a favor. "Send me the paperwork," Reagan told him. "And Michael, this isn't just a divorce. I want every financial record, every off-the-books account, every shell company. If it's there, I want it in my hands." "You're going for the jugular," Michael said, not without admiration. "I'm going for the truth," she replied. Her next call was to someone Damian definitely didn't know about, her godmother, Evelyn Grant. Evelyn was a fixture in the art world, a philanthropist whose personal network included senators, museum directors, and billionaires who didn't need their names in the papers to be powerful. She had been the one to quietly fund Reagan's graduate studies when her scholarship fell short, and she had stayed in Reagan's life as a confidant, though they rarely appeared together in public. "Sweetheart," Evelyn's warm voice crackled over the line. "I saw the footage. He looked like a fool." "That's just the beginning," Reagan said. "I'm done playing the part he cast for me. I need to move fast and I need your help." Evelyn didn't hesitate. "You'll have it. My PR team can make sure the story stays in the headlines for as long as you need. And Reagan, you're not the only one who'd be happy to see him fall." By midnight, Evelyn's people were already reaching out to reporters who'd been on the sidelines for years, collecting quiet grudges against Damian Westwood. Reagan's third call was perhaps the most personal. It was to Marcus Hale, her old boss at the Manhattan Fine Arts Council. Marcus was one of the few people who knew just how much Reagan had sacrificed to marry Damian. He also knew she had a knack for strategy, not just in curating galleries, but in reading people. "I can't go back to the gallery," Reagan told him, "but I need a workspace. Somewhere quiet. Private." "I'll have a key sent to you by morning," Marcus said. "And Reagan, I'll be honest, I always wondered when you'd realize you were smarter than him." She almost laughed. "Guess I finally caught up." When she ended the call, she allowed herself a moment to stand by the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the city lights. She felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: control. Damian thought she'd go to pieces after the gala, thought she'd hide at home and let him manage the fallout. He didn't know she had an entire network waiting for her signal. By 2 a.m., the footage was everywhere. Cable news debated whether the shove was intentional. Gossip blogs dissected Roxanne's reaction frame by frame. Social media was merciless. Hashtags calling for boycotts of Westwood Holdings trended worldwide. Damian emerged from his office, still in his tuxedo but with his tie loosened and his hair slightly disheveled. His eyes were cold. "You think this is funny," he said. Reagan didn't look away from the window. "I think it's the truth. If you can't handle it, maybe you shouldn't have done it." "This will ruin us," he snapped. "No," she said evenly. "It'll ruin you." His mouth tightened. "Careful, Reagan. You're not built for war." She turned then, meeting his gaze with a calm he hadn't seen before. "You've been at war with me for years, Damian. You just didn't notice because I wasn't fighting back. Now I am." He stared at her for a long moment, then shook his head and walked away. When the penthouse door clicked shut behind him, she exhaled slowly. She wasn't naive. She knew he'd retaliate. Damian Westwood didn't like losing, and he had the resources to make her life hell. But he was underestimating her, and that was his first mistake. She sat down at the desk in the corner of the room, opened her laptop, and began drafting a timeline. Step 1 was already complete. Expose the shove. Step 2 would take more precision. She needed to connect Damien's public cruelty to his private corruption. That's where Michael's investigation would come in. She added Evelyn's PR team to the plan, assigning them to feed stories at calculated intervals so the scandal never lost momentum. Marcus's workspace would serve as her war room. And then, at the bottom of the page, she wrote the final step in neat, deliberate letters. Take everything. Leave him with nothing. She closed the laptop and leaned back, one hand resting on her stomach. The baby kicked again, as if in agreement. Don't worry, she murmured. Your father's not going to win this one. By the time dawn broke, Reagan had an army, lawyers, media contacts, and quiet allies in high places. Damien still thought he was playing chess with someone who only knew checkers. What he didn't realize was that Reagan had just put him in checkmate before he'd even made his first move. And the real strike was still to come. The morning after the gala, the city woke up talking about only one thing: Damien Westwood shoving his pregnant wife in front of New York's elite. News anchors replayed the footage on a loop, analysts debated whether it was intentional, and social media exploded with outrage. The hashtags #ChazJustice for Reagan and ShoveGate trended globally. Damien's PR team scrambled to release a statement, something about a misinterpreted moment and an unfortunate accident, but it only made things worse. The public had seen the look on his face, the stumble, the way he didn't even reach for her. They weren't buying it. Reagan stayed in the penthouse that day, not because she was hiding, but because she was planning her reemergence. She knew she couldn't step outside looking like the humiliated wife. No. When the world saw her again, she had to look untouchable. She called Evelyn. I need the best, Reagan said simply. Evelyn didn't ask questions. By mid-morning, a small army arrived at the penthouse: hairstylists, makeup artists, wardrobe consultants. They came armed with garment racks of couture dresses, trays of jewelry, and an air of determination. The lead stylist, a tall woman named Celeste, studied Reagan for a long moment. We're not hiding the pregnancy, she said finally. We're making it your power. You're going to look like a queen, no, an empress. For hours they worked. Her long hair was cut into a sleek, shoulder-length style with sharp edges that framed her face like armor. Her makeup was flawless but bold: dark liner, a deep rose lip, a touch of shimmer that caught the light without looking soft. The wardrobe team brought out a fitted white midi dress that hugged her figure, the color crisp and commanding, paired with a structured cream coat that flared just enough to suggest movement with every step. On her feet, nude heels, practical for her condition, but still elegant. When they were done, Celeste stepped back and smiled. There she is, she said, the woman he should have been afraid of. Reagan studied herself in the mirror. She didn't just look different, she felt different. The sadness from the night before was gone. In its place was something sharper, colder, more deliberate. That afternoon, Evelyn's driver pulled up in front of the building in a black Rolls-Royce. Reagan stepped out of the lobby into a wall of flashing cameras. Reagan, how are you feeling? Do you have a message for your husband? Is the baby okay? She didn't answer any of them directly. Instead, she smiled, a slow, confident smile that said she was in control. I'm doing just fine, she said, and I think the truth speaks for itself. Then she slid into the car and was gone, leaving them shouting after her. Her destination wasn't random. Evelyn had arranged for her to appear at a high-profile charity luncheon supporting single mothers in the arts, an event with just enough irony to sting. When she entered the ballroom, every head turned. Conversations paused. Cameras clicked. The event's host, a respected Broadway producer, greeted her warmly and escorted her to the head table. Reagan gave short, gracious answers to every question about her health, but when the subject of Damien came up, she was careful. I believe in accountability, she said simply, and I believe the world deserves to know the truth about the people they put on pedestals. The quote hit headlines before dessert was served. By evening, lifestyle blogs were publishing side-by-side comparisons. Reagan at the gala, stumbling under Damien's shove, and Reagan now, composed, radiant, and clearly not backing down. The transformation was the story, and the public ate it up. Meanwhile, Damien was having the worst day of his career. Westwood Holdings stock dipped 4% in a single trading session. Several board members demanded an emergency meeting, clients began canceling appearances with him, citing scheduling conflicts. He called her twice that night. She didn't answer. Instead, Reagan sat in her new workspace, Marcus's private gallery office, surrounded by Evelyn's PR team and Michael's legal associates. The walls were covered in whiteboards, charting Damien's business holdings, political donations, and possible skeletons in his closet. Every time a new lead came in, Reagan's pen moved with precision, connecting the dots. She wasn't just preparing for a divorce, she was dismantling his public image piece by piece. Tomorrow, Evelyn's PR lead said, we release the second wave. We've got testimonies from 2 former assistants who say he created a toxic environment. No one's gone on record yet, but they're ready now. Do it, Reagan said. And after that? Michael asked. She looked up from her notes, her eyes cold. After that, we go for the money. If we can tie any of his shady deals to Westwood Holdings investors, the board will turn on him faster than he can blink. Celeste, still hanging around to tweak Reagan's look for upcoming appearances, smiled faintly. I think you might enjoy this more than you expected. Reagan didn't deny it. That night, as she walked back into the penthouse, she found Damien waiting in the living room. He was still in his suit from the day before, looking like he hadn't slept. You've made your point, he said flatly. Now stop. You're embarrassing both of us. She set her purse down and met his gaze without flinching. I'm not done. His jaw tightened. You think you can survive without me? You think you can raise that child on your own? Her smile was slow and deliberate. I think you should start worrying about surviving without me. He didn't reply, but the muscle in his jaw twitched. She walked past him to the bedroom, not looking back. The next morning, a photo of Reagan at the charity luncheon, poised, glowing, unstoppable, was on the front page of 3 major newspapers. Damien's shove wasn't the headline anymore. She was. And the woman he thought he could break was now the one the world was rooting for. By the end of the week, Reagan's name had eclipsed Damien's in the headlines. The footage from the gala was still circulating, but now it was woven into a larger narrative, one of a wronged woman reclaiming her dignity and refusing to be silenced. That was exactly the narrative Reagan wanted. She knew the public was on her side, but sympathy alone wasn't enough. Damien could survive bad press. He had the resources and arrogance to ride out a scandal if it stayed in the realm of gossip. What he couldn't survive was a direct hit to the one thing he valued above all else, his business. On Monday morning, Reagan walked into the Manhattan offices of Westwood Holdings. She didn't sneak in through the back or send her lawyer ahead. She entered through the front, where the security guard's eyes widened in recognition. Mrs. Westwood, he began, but she smiled politely. Not for much longer, she said. The lobby, a cathedral of glass and steel, was already buzzing with employees heading to their desks. Conversations stilled as she stepped into the elevator, her cream coat draped over her shoulders, her heels clicking against the marble floor. She rode to the top floor, where Damien's office occupied the entire corner suite. His assistant, a nervous young man in a too-tight tie, half rose from his desk when she appeared. Mrs. West? Reagan? He's in a meeting. I know, she said calmly, pushing open the double doors without knocking. Inside, Damien sat at the head of a polished conference table, flanked by 3 board members and a financial analyst. A sleek PowerPoint presentation glowed on the screen behind him. The room froze when Reagan entered. Damien's eyes narrowed. We're in the middle of something, he said, his tone a warning. So am I, she replied, setting a manila folder on the table. This is the list of shell corporations you've been using to funnel money from investor accounts into personal ventures, along with the offshore accounts you've conveniently forgotten to disclose to the board. One of the board members, a gray-haired man with a reputation for integrity, reached for the folder. Damien's hand shot out to block him. Don't touch that, Damien snapped. Reagan tilted her head. Why not? If there's nothing to hide, I'm sure they'll find it. Enlightening. The boardroom went silent. Damien's jaw tightened, his knuckles whitening on the table's edge. This is not the place, he began, but she cut him off. This is exactly the place. These men and women trusted you with their money, Damien. They trusted you with their reputations. And you've been using both to line your own pockets while playing king of New York society. One of the other board members, a woman in a charcoal suit, leaned forward. "Is this true?" she asked Damien. He didn't answer. Reagan took that as her cue to leave. "You can keep the folder," she said over her shoulder. "Consider it my parting gift." By the time she reached the lobby again, her phone was buzzing. It was Evelyn. "That little performance is already leaking," Evelyn said, her voice practically humming with satisfaction. "One of the board members called a journalist before you'd even left the building." "Good," Reagan said. "Make sure they know I didn't take a dime. This is about him, not me." 2 hours later, the news broke. Insider allegations rock Westwood Holdings blared across financial news sites. The story didn't come directly from Reagan. It didn't have to. All she'd done was put the right information in the right hands, in front of the right witnesses. The rest took care of itself. By late afternoon, Westwood Holdings stock had dropped another 6%. The board announced an internal review, which everyone knew was corporate speak for someone whose was about to get thrown overboard. Damien called her 5 times that day. She didn't pick up. Instead, she sat in Marcus's gallery office, sipping tea, while Evelyn's PR team drafted a statement for her. It was short, deliberate, and devastating. "I believe in accountability, in marriage, in business, and in public life. My focus is on protecting my child and my future. I will not be intimidated into silence." The statement went live just before the evening news cycle, ensuring maximum coverage. Television anchors dissected her words, pointing out that she hadn't denied anything about Damien's alleged misconduct. The implication was clear. If she had more, she was willing to use it. And she did have more. That evening, Michael called with an update. "We've traced one of the offshore accounts to a holding company in the Cayman Islands. It's in Roxanne Croft's name." Reagan's lips curled into a slow smile. Of course it is. She knew the headline that would make "Millionaire's Mistress linked to offshore accounts in corporate scandal." It would drag Roxanne into the mess and tie her directly to Damien's financial misconduct. "Hold it for now," Reagan told Michael. "Let them sweat over today's news first, then we drop the next bomb." As the sun set over the city, Reagan stood at the window of her workspace, looking out over the skyline. Each tower of glass and steel seemed to glint in approval. She had just walked into Damien's empire and planted a charge at its foundation. She wasn't just fighting back anymore. She was winning. But she knew this was only the first strike. The next one would be personal, and it would hurt more than any loss on a balance sheet. 2 weeks after the gala, the city was still buzzing. Damien's name had become toxic in business circles, whispered only in backroom conversations and behind closed doors. Westwood Holdings was under investigation. Board members were openly talking about his removal for the good of the company. And yet, Damien still clung to the hope that he could control the narrative. That hope died the night Reagan walked into the Westwood Holdings annual investor gala. Alone. It wasn't the same charity gala where everything had started. This was a far more serious affair, attended by investors, analysts, and media outlets hungry for updates on the company's future. Damien had planned to stand on stage, deliver a reassuring speech, and convince the world he was still in charge. Reagan had other plans. She arrived in a floor-length black gown with a high neckline and long sleeves, a look that was powerful without being flashy. Her hair was sleek, her makeup sharp. The diamond pendant she'd worn the night of the shove was replaced by a simple gold chain with a small charm, something that felt like her, not an accessory picked by Damien. The moment she stepped into the lobby, the air changed. Cameras turned. Conversations hushed. She walked with slow, deliberate steps, her hand resting lightly on her belly. She wasn't just attending, she was owning the room. Inside the ballroom, Damien was already at the podium, flipping through his notes as the crowd settled. He looked up, and for a moment he froze. Then he forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "tonight is about looking forward and telling the truth." Reagan's voice rang out from the back of the room. Every head turned. She walked forward, unhurried, her heels clicking against the marble floor. A low murmur rippled through the audience as she approached the stage. Damien's smile faltered. "This isn't your event," he said, his voice tight. "This isn't your company anymore," she replied. She mounted the steps to the stage, coming to stand a few feet from him. She didn't touch the microphone. She didn't need to. Her voice carried. For weeks, you've told the media this is a misunderstanding, she said to the audience. That the shove, the humiliation, the lies, they were accidents. But what you haven't told them is about the money, the offshore accounts, the shell corporations, and the fact that your so-called business partner, Roxanne Croft, has her name on one of them. A gasp went through the crowd. Damien's face darkened. You don't know what you're talking about. Reagan turned to the large projection screen behind them. Play it. The screen flickered to life, not with the gala shove video, but with documents, transaction logs, and wire transfers linking Damien and Roxanne to millions siphoned from investor funds. Each slide was time-stamped, signed, undeniable. The audience erupted. Some investors shouted questions, others turned to each other in disbelief. The camera crews in the back captured every second. You forged signatures, you moved money offshore, and you did it all while pretending to be the respectable face of this company, Reagan continued. But tonight, everyone here sees the truth, and tomorrow, so will the rest of the world. Damien stepped toward her, his voice low. You think this makes you a hero? You think they'll side with you once I tell them how much you've taken from me? She smiled faintly. I haven't taken anything that wasn't mine. But you've taken more than you can ever give back. Security moved in, not for her, but for him. Two men in dark suits flanked Damien, speaking quietly. The board chair, standing near the front, addressed the crowd. Effective immediately, he announced. Damien Westwood is suspended as CEO pending a full investigation. The applause was instant and deafening. Damien's face went pale. Reagan stepped aside as the security guards escorted him from the stage. He didn't look back at her. She turned to the audience. Thank you for your time. I believe the investors deserve transparency. I believe the employees deserve stability. And I believe my child deserves to grow up knowing that the truth always wins. Flashes went off. Her words were already being tweeted, posted, and live-streamed. She gave a small nod, then left the stage. Outside, reporters crowded around her. Reagan, how did you get the evidence? What happens next? She gave them the same calm smile she'd worn walking in. What happens next is justice. The next morning, Damien's arrest for financial fraud was the lead story on every network. Photos of him being led out of his penthouse in handcuffs were paired with clips of Reagan standing on stage, fearless and unflinching. For years, Damien had believed she was just an accessory to his life, a beautiful prop for his public image. That night proved she was the one holding the strings all along, and the world had just watched her cut them, one by one. 3 months later, the world had moved on from Damien Westwood, but Reagan hadn't forgotten. She didn't dwell on him every day. She didn't have to. His name was still in the headlines, but now it was attached to court hearings, indictments, and financial settlements. The trial was still months away, but the outcome was inevitable. The evidence Reagan had helped uncover was airtight. Westwood Holdings had cut all ties, the board had voted unanimously to remove him, and several of his former allies had testified against him to save themselves. Reagan didn't attend the hearings. She didn't need to watch him squirm in a courtroom to feel the victory. Her win had come the moment she walked off that stage at the investor gala. Everything after that was just the echo. She had other things to focus on, like the baby growing inside her and the life she was determined to build without Damien's shadow. Her divorce had been finalized quickly, thanks to the leverage she held. She didn't fight for his penthouse or his cars. Instead, she negotiated for something far more valuable, liquid assets, enough to ensure her independence for life. Damien, desperate to avoid more damaging leaks, had signed without a fight. Reagan moved out of the penthouse and into a restored brownstone in the West Village, a place that felt alive, with creaking hardwood floors, sunlit rooms, and a little garden out back where she could sip tea in the mornings. The first night she slept there, she left the windows open to let the city sounds in. For the first time in years, she slept without the feeling of someone watching her. Her days found a new rhythm. She met with architects to design a nursery, attended prenatal yoga classes, and took long walks through the neighborhood. People recognized her sometimes at the cafe, but their smiles weren't pitying anymore. They were admiring. "You're stronger than most people I know," one woman told her in the grocery store, her voice low as if sharing a secret. Reagan had simply smiled, She didn't feel like a hero, she just felt free. Evelyn remained a constant presence, visiting often and fussing over Reagan like a second mother. Marcus insisted she keep using the gallery office as her workspace, and together they began developing a new initiative, an arts foundation dedicated to supporting women in creative fields who had faced abuse or financial control. Reagan poured her heart into the project, using both her experience and her newfound platform to secure funding. It wasn't just work, it was healing. The baby's due date drew closer, and with it came a sense of quiet anticipation. One crisp spring morning, Reagan woke before dawn, unable to sleep. She wrapped herself in a sweater and stepped out into the garden, breathing in the cool air. The city was still, the streets damp from an overnight rain. She rested her hands on her stomach. "We made it," she whispered. "We're gonna be okay." The baby kicked, and she smiled. Later that week, the call came. Damien had accepted a plea deal. He would serve prison time and pay massive restitution. The news outlets framed it as the fall of a titan, but for Reagan, it was just the final chapter closing. She didn't gloat. She didn't even tell anyone right away. She simply went about her day, tending to the life she had fought to protect. 2 weeks later, she gave birth to a healthy baby boy. She named him Samuel James Westwood Davies, a name that carried her strength and her history. Evelyn was at her side in the hospital, holding her hand through the delivery. When the nurse placed Samuel in her arms, Reagan felt an overwhelming rush of love and relief. "This is your fresh start," Evelyn whispered. It was more than that. It was their victory. Reagan's story became one that people told in quiet moments over coffee or wine, about the woman who had been pushed in public and pushed back harder. She didn't seek the spotlight, but she didn't hide from it either. When a prominent magazine asked her to do a feature on resilience and reinvention, she agreed. Not to talk about Damien, but to talk about survival, about starting over, about the importance of knowing your own worth. In the interview, the journalist asked her if she forgave him. Reagan thought for a long moment before answering. "I don't forgive what he did," she said, "but I've stopped letting it define me. Forgiveness isn't for him, it's for me, and I've already given myself that." When the piece was published, the photo of her holding Samuel in the garden made the cover. The caption read, "The woman who walked away and won." Months passed. Summer arrived. Samuel grew stronger, his eyes bright and curious. Reagan found joy in the smallest moments, watching him sleep, feeling his tiny fingers curl around hers, reading to him in the quiet afternoons. One day, while pushing Samuel's stroller through the park, she passed a newsstand. Damien's face was on the cover of a tabloid, the headline blaring about his upcoming sentencing. Reagan glanced at it briefly, then kept walking. He was part of her story, but no longer the center of it. As she reached the park's fountain, she paused, looking up at the sky. She thought about everything it had taken to get here, the humiliation, the fear, the nights she'd cried alone. She thought about the moment in the bathroom at the penthouse when she'd promised herself she'd fight, and she realized she had kept that promise. Her life now was not about revenge. It was about peace. It was about Samuel. It was about herself, the woman she had fought to reclaim. Reagan took a seat on a bench, Samuel sleeping in his stroller beside her. She pulled out a notebook and began jotting down ideas for the Foundation's next project. The world still had too many women who thought they had no way out. She intended to show them there was always a way. As the sun dipped lower, casting the park in a warm golden glow, she closed the notebook and watched the people passing by, some smiling, some lost in thought, all moving forward. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was living. And she knew with absolute certainty that no one, not Damien, not anyone, would ever take that from her again. Because she had learned the truth. Sometimes the shove that knocks you down is the very thing that pushes you into the life you were meant to have. So the story has ended, my wonderful friends. Are you still here with me until now? If you are, it means something in this journey has touched your heart in its own way. Maybe it's a reminder that no matter how hard life pushes us down, we can still rise, stronger than before. As an old heterodox saying goes, the wound is the place where the light enters you. Sometimes, the pain we think will break us is the very thing that shapes us into who we're meant to be. So if you're facing your own storms, remember, you are not powerless, and you are not alone. Let this story be a little spark for your courage. If you feel it, please like this video, share it so others can feel it too, and subscribe to the channel. And hey, drop your thoughts in the comments, because I want to hear your story too.